Today on the show,
when they're interested in selling, they're going to find a solution, and we have to solve for that solution as fast as possible.
Using direct mail to bolster your business. Welcome to the Not Another Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm Dan Riando, joined by Brian Davis. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Danny. How you doing today?
I'm good. How was your 4th of July?
Oh, it was wonderful. We had a picnic. We also have this great lake that we go to. So I took one of my boys out there. We went swimming in the morning, and it was just pretty chill. Didn't get to hit the fireworks, so we'll have to work that in somewhere this summer. I'm sure there'll be fireworks somewhere.
In my part of the world, it's the 1st of July is the national holiday. So we're just a couple of days apart from one another.
Oh, that's for Canada?
In Canada Day, it is, yes. I did get some fireworks this year, which was quite good.
Is that what they call it, Canada Day?
That's it, yep. How's business going? We were just talking off air a little bit about how you had some mailers going out, which kind of fits well into today's interview. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of trying drumming up new business?
Yeah, so we've been hitting absentee owners with postcards and got a probate mailer going out today or tomorrow. And so just been on the phone talking to people and trying to make something happen over here.
You know, I think it might be surprising for a lot of folks to hear about like direct mail, mailers as a method of contacting people. It's so digital focused these days. Indeed, we've talked a lot about digital marketing on the podcast, but is that old school analog way of communicating with people still worthwhile, do you think?
Yeah, it's very difficult to contact people through email now. And to do that in large volume, just based on every day with machine learning algorithms and them figuring out how to stop people from sending unsolicited mail, it doesn't work out that well. And then again, with phone calls and trying to target the right people, it's very difficult to get a phone number linked to a property. But with direct mail, it's nice because you can go through the town records, you can find out who the owner is, you can identify some points of motivation, and you can mail people directly. So as expensive as it might be, one touch for a mailer might be 50 cents to $1. And your cost to send like a text message or an email or a phone call might be 1 cent or less. But the problem is that it's really difficult to target people. And then if you are just sending in mass, emails or phone calls or text messages or anything like that, you have to sort through a lot of shitty leads to get to anything good. So with direct mail and real estate, it seems like it's still one of the best ways to acquire deals because you can target your audience so well.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. If you're trying to sell homes, you may as well send things to homes to try and contact the people, which I guess fits well into this interview that we recorded a couple of days ago with Michael Quarles. You really were interested in this. In fact, we're going to split it into 2 parts because it was so long. Do you want to set it up a little bit for the audience? Who is Michael and why did you want to invite him on?
Yeah, I first ran across Michael on Bigger Pockets. He comments on a lot of posts and he's really helpful in that community. And he also has his own podcast. And I ran across him on the Bigger Pockets podcast. And he talks a lot about direct mail. He has some really interesting strategies for monetizing leads that come in. He'll actually get a property under contract and do a wholesale, but he'll use the MLS to sell the property. Michael also has a direct mail company called yellowletters.com. And I've used them in the past, and they provide all the solutions that an investor would need, from yellow letters, typed letters, postcards, and then some other interesting sorts of, express letter types of solutions and that sort of thing. And I thought out of this interview, one of the most interesting takeaways for me is when he talks about cluster marketing. I'll just set that up and hopefully somebody will listen to the interview to understand what he's saying there. But I thought that was a really big takeaway. A lot of people like to send the same pieces to the same houses and try to brand themselves, but Michael kind of goes in a different direction. So I really appreciated him coming on, and I think he provides an incredible amount of value to real estate investors, especially in the direct mail arena. And he does some interesting things with his other companies. He also has something called calltext.com, which provides some sort of solution to capture phone phone calls coming in and to kind of streamline that process. So I think that's about it. I think you'd have to really listen to him. He does a much better job of explaining it than I do.
Well, with that, let's listen to our interview with Michael Quarles. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I thought maybe we'd start off just by introducing yourself to the audience. Can you talk a little bit about your journey, both as an entrepreneur and a real estate investor?
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my real estate investment career when I was an adult teenager, and that was many sunsets ago, way back in the day. I'm 56 years young, so it was 37 years ago. I've enjoyed it ever since, probably bought over 1,000 houses. I should have kept track of each one of them. But I do remember the horror stories and the beautiful stories and everything in between. I fell in love with dirt. I was enlisted in the Air Force, and waiting for my enlist date, I opened up the newspaper, and those were things we read back in the day. And there was an advertisement for an R2 lot. I had no idea what R2 meant together, but I called the real estate professional and put an offer in and started constructing a duplex while I was waiting for the Air Force date. Like I said, I fell in love with dirt. I called my recruiter and asked him to get out of the Air Force, and they said yes, thank goodness. And here I am.
Why did you want to switch from just being an investor to sort of sharing your investment knowledge over those 37 years? I was just on your website this morning, and you offer a wealth of information along with the podcast. Why did you want to make that shift?
I think that's what life's all about. As a conservative Republican, it's probably uncommon for people to think that we like giving, but I absolutely like giving. I can't die with it. I can't take it with me, so I might as well give it all away. And one of the things that we have that is knowledge and experience. And so it's my dessert of the day, if that makes any sense. Having the 7 companies that I have and running all the businesses and having a wonderful life, that's pretty cool too. However, it doesn't feed the core belief that I have, and that's to help someone who can't help themselves. And not meaning that we're only helping those people that are in dire straits. We're helping someone see the different picture of life and the reality. I'm a big believer in benchmarks. Benchmarks for me are places people have been or places I have been. The places I have been can show someone that it's viable, that it can happen for them. The places that are ahead of me that other people have been are the places that are my future reality. And I like that concept of life. Being a guy who believes in abundance and prosperity, I can't ever lose anything. So if I give my knowledge away, I can't lose it. I'm only giving it away to someone else to utilize. So I like that concept of life. I don't know how other people, what they do with their time, but like I say, this is my dessert.
Your area of expertise, I think, amongst others, is direct mail. That's really the reason why I reached out to you, because it's a huge part of a real estate investor's deal flow. And especially when the market gets really competitive, it's really difficult to buy properties off the MLS. Right. And investors start turning to direct mail. And I was just hoping you could maybe talk about your current business, how you use direct mail, kind of what you've seen recently in the direct mail arena.
Sure. I got into direct mail, or I became, quote unquote, an expert in it. Because being in the real estate investment business for so long, way back in the day, we didn't have service companies like we do now today in today's marketplace. We didn't have the internet, although it was there. It wasn't something that a person could use. It was for the military kind of thing. So way back in the day, I just started, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and I made a lot of mistakes. And when I started marketing, I used direct mail considerably. And I had a host of folks starting to come at me and ask me how I bought 100 houses a year. And the simple answer was, I marketed. If you don't market, you're not going to buy anything. But the methods for marketing were direct mail. And so I had enough people ask me about it. So I started a direct mail company. I thought it was going to be this little itty bitty thing. I didn't realize it was going to take my life away. And however, I like direct mail. It's one of the few marketing types where we can pinpoint our audience rather effectively. When we do shotgun marketing approaches, and those things are like pay-per-click or Facebook or YouTube or bandit signs or even some TV commercials placement, billboards, that kind of thing. That's all shotgun approach. We can't dictate or can't reasonably expect our audience. But in the direct mail business, I can tell when I send a letter out to somebody, I can tell how long they've owned it, what type of structure it is, what their equity position is in it, what that value of the property is. And I know that phone call coming back at me is one that I can utilize, where if I have a phone call from a TV commercial, I may know they may have a higher likelihood of motivation because they're calling me from an advertisement on TV, but I don't know if they're qualified to sell me a house. We're in the direct mail business. They're absolutely qualified every time the phone rings. And I like that approach. With all that said, it's rather useless if we don't have a mechanism or a system for follow-up, because when you can have lead generation. So I think there's 4 components to all business. You can have lead generation, but if you have a lousy capture system and a lousy lead nurturing system and lead fulfillment system, why make the phone ring? And most people fall down at the phone call. I know I happen to be able to make the phone ring off the hook. It's that after that phone rings, that's the important part. And it's all built through systemization, in my opinion. I don't know if you want to talk about that. If you don't want to go there, that's a big topic.
How about we first? So you said you're gonna create your mail piece and you're going to send it to people with equity. How do you build these lists that you target, and how do you determine that they have equity? Beyond, I understand we have ListSource and a few other providers, but do you ever do this from any other methods to be able to gather that information and build the lists?
For me, anyway, prior to the list building process, I run what we call a marketing algorithm. So I'm going to look at a city, and we have about 240 cities across the country that we can market to that are worthy. I look at a city, and then I run an algorithm on it. So what I'm pulling from that from several databases actually are how many cash buyers did we have in the last 6 months? How many units are in a zip code? How many units are in foreclosure? How many units are in NOD status, REO status? What my days on market is, what my average or my median value is, how many units have equity that's at 30% or greater, and then how many of those units fall into a bottom third, middle third, top third of an equity position. And from a median consideration. And once I have that algorithm, it'll tell me where to market. Now, when I know where to market, which is the component that I need the most, then I'll go to a company like ListSource or USA Data or some of the other service providers that can feed me back addresses based upon a criteria. Now, for myself, I'm an equity investor. So for me, what that means is I'm not going to buy a marginal property. So I'm not going to buy a house that has less than 30% equity in it. So I'm not doing, in today's market, I'm not doing any short sales, foreclosure buying, because typically the foreclosures won't have an equity position. I'm not doing any of the lease option purchases or the slim equity deals. All the sub twos that I buy have to have an equity position as well. So as I run my equity lists, my criteria is single family, 30% equity or greater, 5-year ownership or longer, and it has to stay under median for the zip code. So if my median in that zip code is 154,000, then I won't market to a house more than 154,000 because I know my value is under that, or my potential value is under that. And so that saves my marketing budget because I know I'm not going to buy $1 million investment property unless median for that area is $1 million. And so it works well. And then from a piece perspective, we don't send the same piece over and over again. We use, we use what we call cluster marketing. And for me, cluster marketing is 6 different pieces over a 6-month period, different phone numbers, different looks, different feel. So the consumer believes there's 6 different investors marketing to them. And I don't refer back to the last piece I sent them because that would squash the concept. And cluster works. And so if you and I were marketing to the same individual and you sent out a similar piece or the same piece every month for 6 months, and I sent out 6 different ones, the consumer thinks there's 7 people marketing to them. There's only 2 of us. I have a higher chance of getting the phone call. But more than that, I know a yellow letter will be, people will respond with a yellow letter that like the yellow letter. The people that don't like it won't pick up the telephone and call me. So I send them a typed letter, and I send someone else a postcard. I send someone else a zip letter or a naked letter. So they're all different types of mail pieces with all the same goal. I mean, we buy houses, we pay cash for them, solve problems, give them their money on the day of their choice. And it works well. And I couldn't be driving my Rolls Royce if it didn't work well.
Yeah. So, because people resonate different with different types of pieces, right?
There's, like I'm wearing a pair of khaki pants and a blue shirt, Tommy Bahama. You're probably not. You're probably wearing something different. And if I go to my closet, I don't have all khaki pants in there. I have slacks, I have shorts, I have all kinds of different colors of shirts. And so we like options. And cluster marketing has been around for a long time. We just didn't drive it to the direct mail arena until I started doing it. If you look at cluster marketing, as an example of that, Coca-Cola has 6 bottled waters, but inside the bottle is water. One's a square one, one's a tall one, one's a short one, one's a brown one, one's a blue one, but they're all bottled water. So when you go to your convenience store for a bottled water, Coca-Cola wants the biggest opportunity to sell you something. Consumers believe that there are 6 different companies they're buying from. There's not. There's one. They do it with car lots. They do it with shopping malls. Fast food chains, it's proven that if they put a fast food restaurant on one corner and another type of fast food restaurant on another corner, that those 2 stores will be busier than if only one of them were there. Because people like options. They like opportunity to have different things. And so cluster marketing works.
What does your current, you said that you look at 240 different markets, you run a bunch of numbers, you evaluate the data, and then you determine where you want to mail to. What's your current business look like for real estate? What are you currently up to?
We're putting a house under contract pretty much every day. Whether we turn that into an actual viable deal at the end of the check and balance systems that we run is a different story. But yeah, we'll do 100 houses a year.
Are those wholesale or wholetail?
No, I'm not. I don't. I think I've done one wholesale deal in my life. So we know there's a signing, there's wholesaling, there's fix and flipping, and then there's passive. I kind of created a hybrid. I call it wholeteling. And so for me, wholeteling is I always deal with as is. I never deal with ARV. And because I'm never going to fix and flip it. So I'm never going to go to Home Depot and buy a 2x4 or some nails or a toilet. So I'm going to buy it at a percentage of as is value and sell it at 100% of as is value. I'm buying it straight from the consumer, so straight from the seller, but I'm selling it to the buyer through the multiple listing service. So ultimately, I'm going to hire a real estate professional. Although I'm a broker, I'm not going to work for a commission. I'd rather make 35%, which is what I do, and pay a commission to someone else that manages the transaction and opens the inventory up to all of the eyes that are out there looking for inventory via the MLS. So it's called wholesaling, and it works well. We put it on the market as soon as we have it under contract. We're going to concurrent close it most of the time. People tell me that I can't concurrent close, but I do it most of the time. There are times that I have to end up buying the house because I haven't found my buyer fast enough. However, that's rare because on the wholesale model, the property is sitting at what appears to be undervalued value because most properties are at ARV, not as is. Although some properties can be ARV and as is, most of them in our markets, because we're buying under median, have it, and I'm not going to turn the value into ARV. It's sitting there $50,000 less than ARV is, and so it gets looked at a lot. And as an example, the one we just closed, we paid $32,000 for it. It's in Florida somewhere. We sold it for $64,900, and everything was done through the MLS. I never owned it except for the day I bought it and the day we sold it. So,
yeah. So, could you talk a little about that dance that you do with the wholesale?
Sure.
From a lot of people have or believe that you can't put it on the MLS unless you own it. So how do you structure something like that?
National Association of Realtors, way back in their day of their forming the multiple listing service and their wisdom, It was in the pre-computer day stage of life. In that original arena, trading or bartering was really common in real estate. And they specifically outlined inside of the multiple listing service rules on how the boards conduct the multiple listing service. They specifically said the seller is the one that authorized the insertion of the property into the multiple listing service. And then they actually identify who the owner is. The owner is someone who has constructive notice. So they have a deed that's recorded in the county that the property's in, telling the world who the owner is. The seller and the owner are two different people. When I enter into a contract with a seller, prior to signing that contract, they are the owner and the seller. The moment they agree to sell me the property, they relinquish the right of the seller and only become the owner. I become the seller. I'm also the buyer. And because I'm the seller, I can actually put it in the MLS. My own board, and again, I'm a broker in California, my own board challenged the right of me putting it in the multiple listing service prior to ownership. And after careful consideration, they agreed with me. And I buy them all over the country and put them all in the multiple listing service. And is it objected to by some brokers? Certainly, as it's not something that brokers are aware that they can do. And that's okay. But there are realtors out there that will actually do it. And I get the owner to give me the authorization to do it, although I'm not legally required to have them give me the authorization. I just think it's ethical for me to tell the seller in the agreement to purchase that I'm going to make a huge amount of money when I buy and sell their property. I'm going to start marketing it instantly, which includes the multiple listing service. I could have signed the contract if I want to. So I let them know ahead of time what's going to happen. And they don't care. I mean, our sellers, all they want is our money on the day of their choice that we've agreed to. And most sellers want me to make as much as I can. I find that honesty with individuals is a lot better game plan than hiding something. Anytime you have to question whether you should hide something from someone, you probably shouldn't do it.
And have you had any issues where the board kicked back and said you can't do that?
Not a single one.
You haven't, huh?
Now, there's a difference between, like in my state of California, the assignment law with the Bureau of Real Estate. It clearly says that a person cannot assign more than 8 contracts a year without being a licensee or having that transaction transacted by a licensee. Well, so assigning in a lot of places, which a lot of people call wholesaling, in some areas it is illegal or can be illegal. I'm actually taking constructive notice. So I'm actually buying the property. And I'm just happen to be offering it for sale prior to buying it. But I have the right to do that. And if you look at the option business, that's what an option business is the right to sell something you don't yet own. We just do it ethically and legally.
Do you ever partner with people in other states that have a property under contract that want to go that route?
No, I have. I found that now I have a coaching program, which I don't know if we wanted to talk about. I find that
sure.
I don't, because I know how to market. I don't need anybody to bring me a deal. And so I don't buy wholesale deals. I look at the wholesale dollar or the assignment dollar. The cost of that is, if I had put that in my own marketing, I would have a greater reward. So there's not a lot of reason for me to do that, if that makes any sense.
Right.
And which is one of the reasons I don't buy off the MLS. The only property I've ever bought off the MLS is the first one I ever bought. And after that, I learned that although realtors are required, and some of them are worthy of that requirement, I know how to do what they do from a buying perspective. So there's not a lot of reason for me to use one to buy a piece of property. I also know that it's very difficult for a realtor to persuade a seller who they've already convinced a value, the property's worth this value, to sell that property at 65%, because that's where I'm going to buy. And if they if they did have a seller that would buy or sell at 65%, they would probably buy it themselves and go through the disclosure process of letting them know what their ultimate gain is going to be. And so I really doubt they're going to sell it to me at a value that's going to cause me to get excited. If they did, that 6% that I would, because buyers always pay real estate fees, although it's the seller's authorization of it, that 6% that's would be paid out to somebody on the purchase, I would rather use that for my own marketing dollar. Because on a typical house of 200 grand, 6% is 12,000. I know I have a 10-time multiplier. So if I spend 1,000, I'm going to make 10,000. If I spend 100,000, I'm going to make $1 million. So if I spent $12,000 in marketing, I know what that return is going to be back to me. So I don't see a lot of reason to buy off the MLS.
So I'm a real estate broker here in Connecticut, and we also buy properties. What sort of disclosure would somebody in my position have to provide? Because there's that possibility that somebody feels I owe them, some kind of fiduciary representation or something like that. Is there a certain...
California is probably the most strict state on fiduciary responsibilities and disclosures. And even California doesn't have an issue with it. As long as I don't have an expectation of earning a commission, then I don't have a fiduciary responsibility. I'm not listing it in my agreement, although it says to the seller that I'm a California real estate broker and a licensee. It also says that we do not have an agency relationship. But short of that, I don't think you need anything. And now, if you are a listing, like although I'm a broker, I'm not a broker for hire. So I'm not going to go out and list a property or sell a property for someone. If I were that person, then I'm absolutely walking a real fine line. And I think in that occasion, which hat do you wear first? And you would absolutely want to be very, very upfront and forward with the seller. If you are a buyer, not a listing agent, you'd want to make sure that you got them to sign a non-agency agreement. I'm sure your state has those. We have those in mine.
Right.
And so everybody knows what positions we play.
Yep.
And I've been audited by the DRE, or the Bureau of Real Estate. They changed their name 3 times, and with a success. So it's fairly painless.
If I'm going to send direct mail, there's the situation where I would ideally buy the property. But if it's it's the type of mailer or the type of response where I can't buy the property just based on their numbers, I can monetize it by listing the property for them. Or if it's in their best interest, I can list the property for them to get them more money for their property. So in that case, if you're going to be playing both sides of this, where I could either buy your property or I could help you resell it, when you do something like that, that's a fine line. If you go...
Absolutely.
Right.
There are forms and disclosures for folks to use so that they can explain that fine line.
Right.
I absolutely don't believe anybody should use any form of marketing to disguise what their ultimate intention is. And it's a very careful line. And by the way, there's a third option there too. There are folks out there that are not buying the property at the as-is value. However, they're contracting with the seller to create the ARV value and then splitting the appreciation from the as-is to the ARV with the seller. So there's a host of ways to work with a seller who won't sell you their property at a discount today that will cause an investor to make money in the future. And as a licensee, it sometimes makes it easier because you can dispose of the property quicker and faster and then list it originally. So
right.
If I had a, and I don't do this, by the way, but if I had a seller that was at 95% of value, I can't make any money at 95%. However, if that's as is value, and if I put 50 grand into it, I can get 150,000 back. There are methods for attracting those sellers and splitting the profits with them, which could be advantageous. I just see there's enough equity sellers out there that are going to sell me a house at a discount that don't have to do that.
Right. All right. So let's go back to direct mail. And
sure.
Ideally, I think most people are are most concerned with, they have $2,000 or $3,000. They want to get started. They don't have a huge budget for direct mail. If you had only a few $1,000s and you really needed to make something happen with your business, what type of content would you send, and what type of mail piece would you send, and who would you send that to? And keep in mind, you would have to buy the list as well. So if you only have a small budget to work with.
If I had a small budget to work with, and I'm going to cannibalize this a little bit, but if I had small budget to work with, I wouldn't do direct mail. Because the biggest, for me anyway, the biggest problem with limited budgets and direct mail is the direct mail in itself won't cause enough action for a limited budget to perform. I'd rather that person, if they had $3,000 and that's all they had, I'd rather them market center of influence via texting or the telephone and cold call like crazy. Build that budget up that they could do $1,000 a month for over a 6-month period. If they had that budget, then 1,000 pieces of mail that I would put in the mail today, they're only, with the list, is only $550. So you get almost 2,000 folks. That's not not going to be a bad return. You'll buy a house every month, and or you should. But on a smaller budget than that, I'd be real apprehensive of suggesting anybody do it. And then the bigger problem for most new investors is they're not yet systemized. So the phone rings, but because this isn't a full-time gig yet, they sure want it to be because they're tired of their job, but they have one. And when the phone rings, it's important that we're responsible to the call capture and the follow-up. And unless we have those systems in place, every dollar we spend on marketing is a wasted dollar. Where if we're cold calling or we're marketing to our center of influence, we're using what I call sweat marketing. So we are very responsible to our marketing dollar because we're doing it. But I have had way too many folks call me up and say, it worked great, but I didn't have the time to return any phone calls. Like, well, that phone call only lasts about 10 minutes, the life of it. So if we don't answer it within 10 minutes or call it back within 10 minutes, we're wasting our marketing dollar. They're going to call somebody else because we're not the only one sending them something. They're being touched on multiple ways, either from direct mail or Google or Facebook or YouTube or a billboard or a bandit sign. So when they're interested in selling, they're going to find a solution, and we have to solve for that solution as fast as possible.
That was the first part of our conversation with Michael Quarles. Part 2 will be up next week. You can learn more about Michael by going to his website. That's michaelquarles.com. Last name is spelled Quarles. That's all the time we have for this edition of the show. We'll be back next week with part 2 of our conversation with Michael Quarles. You can review and rate the podcast at Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time.